Well, there isn't a role. It's not a job that you apply for. My name is Austin Ivereigh. I'm British. I'm a writer and journalist and biographer of Pope Francis. And also I work in Catholic communication in general. I'm okay. I've just arrived here in Portimao in Portugal and beginning to soak up the atmosphere of this extraordinary gathering of, I don't know, many young people. I think something like 4,000. I've just been at one Eucharist with the whole stadium full, and it was very, very energizing and impressive. Well, there isn't a role. It's not a job that you apply for. In fact, I wrote his biography in 2014. It came out in 2014, I should say. And before it came out, I never had met him or spoken to him. So the reason I wrote the biography was that many years ago, I did my PhD on the church in Argentina. And so I'm proof that sometimes PhDs can be useful, even if you have to wait 20 years to discover how. But I felt back in 2014 that I could have a role in explaining, above all, to an English-speaking audience, something of the complexities of Argentina, where the Pope comes from. So that's why I did the biography, and it had some success, and the Pope got to know me, or asked to see me, I think, later on as a result of that, and we formed, I suppose, more of a closer working relationship. And in 2020, I did a book with him called Let Us Dream, in French, Un temps pour changer, which was me helping him really put the book together, in which he addresses people about the COVID crisis. So I suppose in recent years we formed more of a closer working relationship. Well, I decided to write the biography by this is the structure that I chose. Each chapter begins with a moment from the first year of the pontificate, a surprising or dramatic moment, if you like, in the pontificate. And I then go back and I tell his life story through each chapter. So I make a link between what's happening in the pontificate and his earlier life. But I mean, in a sense, writing a biography is easy because you know where it begins and you know where it ends. And the challenge is to select what is most important. And then the other challenge every biographer has, is when you're telling the story of a life, there are moments which you can't account for, which aren't well documented, and therefore you have to deal with those challenges. But the beautiful thing about doing a biography, and particularly the biography of a recently elected pope, is that you can begin to see that this person does not come from nowhere, that they bring with them a whole life of struggle, of holiness, but also brings the history of their own church. In a sense, when we elect a successor of St. Peter, we're also electing the church which they come from. And so that's one of the beautiful, fascinating things about a pontificate and about Francis, is that we had with Francis the arrival of this wind from the south, the Latin American wind, the Jesuit wind, and the wind particularly of the Church of Argentina. So it's been a real privilege to understand what that's meant for the church and to try to interpret it and explain it. Yeah, it's one can talk about particular moments that are dramatic, that are newsworthy. Of course, in retrospect, they're not necessarily the most important moments. I will always remember him coming back from World Youth Day in Rio de Janeiro in July 2013 and standing up in front of the journalists. I wasn't there, by the way, but and there was just this hour and a half free-flowing exchange where the journalists asked him absolutely anything they wanted. He didn't prepare anything. And for me, this was a moment of extraordinary breakthrough in terms of the way popes and indeed the church communicate. So I would certainly say that one. I think the Synod on the Family of 2014-2015 marked a whole new moment of honesty in the church, in which the bishops discovered that they could speak freely and that was okay. but also of real discernment. What is it that the Spirit is asking of us? So I think the whole synodal journey of this pontificate has been extremely significant, but I would say it began there in that synod on the family. I think there have been some extraordinary moments in terms of his visits to migrant places like Lesbos and Malta, where he's gone to meet people who are trapped, essentially, and recognized them and spoken for them on the world stage. I think have been very important moments. And then how could I not also mention Laudato Si, which was this just such a groundbreaking moment for not just the church, but the whole world. And the idea that this encyclical could influence, and indeed did influence, shape the COP21 meeting in Paris in December of 2015. So these are some of the highlights. There will be many more that I could mention, but those would just be some of them. So World Youth Day has always become, well, since the time of John Paul II, a moment where the Pope speaks very directly to the next generation. And so to some extent, he's affirming them in their faith, but he's encouraging them. But he's also hearing from them and letting them speak to him. So what I love about World Youth Day, and particularly with this Pope, is the way he listens and the way he enters into the dialogue with young people. Because what he's doing, I think, and what he will be doing in World Youth Day is modeling a way that the church needs to be now in the contemporary world. And I think he does it better than anybody. There was a wonderful moment this year when there was a meeting with young people that was broadcast by Disney. And it was really, of all the interviews he's done, of all the dialogues he's done in this whole pontificate, for me it was the most missionary. And where he's with these young people, and by the way, he told me, the Pope, that he said to the organizer of it, is it okay if we have perhaps at least one Catholic present? So most of them there had nothing to do with the church, but they just wanted to put everything to the Pope that they wanted to, and he responded. And I think the courage that took, and the openness, the accountability, his vulnerability and his humility, to me, spoke everything about how we need to evangelize in this contemporary world. I think it was a brilliant, brilliant moment. Oh, I think he's open. The thing about this Pope is he's open to reality in general, human reality. There is no part of human reality which escapes this Pope, or that he's afraid of entering. Whether it be the life of prisoners, whether it be the life of migrants, the life of people who have been abused or trafficked or whatever. And he hears, and he's constantly in touch with people and hears their stories. And from the very beginning, from before he was Pope, he always had a very, very fluid dialogue with young people. So he knows what it is to be young nowadays, absolutely. And he's constantly stressing to young people, it's very hard in this world to commit. It's not easy for you. Property prices and salaries and the way society is set up is very difficult now for young people and indeed for the elderly. So I think he totally understands the obstacles that young people face. But he also says to young people, this is the time to be opening your heart to the kingdom of God, to what Christ is saying to you. Because in a way, your place in society makes you a vehicle of prophecy, a vehicle of the Spirit. And I think this affirmation of young people has been very, very important. I suppose I can't, because you never quite know what Francis is going to do, And one thing I've learnt about him is he prepares very deeply for these moments, for these encounters. And there's a lot of prayer and discernment goes into what he's going to say. He might, ask somebody to give him notes or help, but he himself will be discerning what is the key message or the moment that he thinks the Spirit is inviting him to inhabit when he enters into this moment. And to that extent, therefore, it's impossible to predict, because I can't tell you what his discernment will be. What I do feel about this moment in Lisbon is that there is an element of valediction about it. It's possible, of course, that the Pope will be around for the next World Youth Day, but in a way, it feels to me like he's 86, and he's got some very important things to pass on to this amazing gathering in Lisbon. And I think what we're going to be hearing from Francis is going to come very, very deep from his heart. I think there's going to be an urgency about what he says. I think he's very convinced of the drama of the moment. And therefore, I think this is going to be a compelling moment for this pontificate in the life of the church, and I think above all in the lives of the young people who will be there.